for the?
I'd like to
I'm sorry.
relive
I keep seeing Pastor Jeffrey look at the mic and like speak into the mic. Okay, I'm doing it. I just like looking
He
at
just wants to
y'all.
look in our eyes when he talks to us.
By the way, this is the first time that we're recording one of these. It's not going to be posted or released first. But I'm Matt, lead pastor of Redemption City, and with me is Pastor Jeffrey Noblet, worship arts pastor extraordinaire is the official title.
I think that's official.
It's on the website, I think.
Yeah, website.com. And so, the idea of this podcast is Redemption City stories. We just want to, as we grow and reach more people, we also want to really know each other really deeply and well. So if we do one or so of these a month over the next few years, we'll all get to know each other. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the idea. So, Courtney, I would like to tell you, you're such a blessing to our church. I can't imagine our church without you, honestly. And your empathy, your compassion, one of the things that you say about yourself, but we all, like, you love big. And I really appreciate that. I love that our kids, as a kids ministry and our whole church gets to experience that from you. And so one thing that the audience needs to know about Courtney is she celebrates Christmas way too early.
That's his opinion.
That is his opinion.
I'm actually with Courtney on this one.
So would you tell the audience very quickly, tell our church, how early you celebrate Christmas?
Well, if I have it my way, like if I don't have roommates, I'll decorate November 1st without hesitation.
Yeah. Just get past Thanksgiving. Okay, so Courtney, this is Courtney Fox, our kids minister here, but of course, much more than that.
Much more.
Our entire church loves Courtney Fox. So, Courtney, start at the beginning. Where were you born? Tell us about your childhood.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah, start at the beginning.
We love this. Okay. I was born in a small town called Lamar's, Iowa. I'm sure that everyone has heard of it.
Hot spot.
It's a hot spot. There used to be a college there, Westmar University. That's where my parents went to college. So I was born to a couple college kids who are the best. And I lived in Iowa until I was 11. I attended a teeny tiny little farm town school and church. They weren't combined, but they were both teeny tiny farm town school and church. My grandparents actually started the small church that I grew up in. Yeah. And so that was really cool. And it was right next door to my grandparents' house. So we would go to church and then walk over to my grandparents to have lunch. Then we moved to Arkansas. My parents, the company they worked for at the time, got bought out, which moved us to Northwest Arkansas. And my life changed very drastically. I went from a class of 30 to a class of 600, which is a big difference. Yeah. I also have this distinct memory of telling my parents that I'm so sorry I love Arkansans now, okay? And I consider myself one. But I remember telling my parents, I'm not going to move to a state where they don't wear shoes and they're missing their teeth.
Right.
Which was not kind of me. I understand
More than
that.
a stereotype.
It does happen. But that's
some places.
Different places besides where I lived. I won't name places.
Right.
And so that's
where's
really...
Ed from? Anyway.
Yeah.
That part.
That exact part. We started attending a church there, a very large church. And when I was in 7th grade, that is when I met Jesus. And I was 12, almost 13. I got baptized 2 days before my 13th birthday.
No way.
And yeah, it was awesome. And it was the best. I think I was eager for God in a way that I hadn't been before, but still didn't understand a lot of things. Anyways, started following Jesus, but didn't really know super what that looked like. I had a general idea, but didn't really have anybody discipling me or anything like that through high school. Went to a really large public high school, loved my time there. Wouldn't go back, but it was a great experience overall. And ended up going to the University of Arkansas. Woo Pig.
Suey.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Do you add the Suey all the time, or is it just?
I just usually say Woo Pig.
Sorry.
Unless you can say Woo Pig, Suey.
I didn't think that was.
Yeah,
That's how you call them. Okay. So sometimes you don't want them to show up just yet.
Go ahead.
No, that's okay. But that summer between my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college, I was having a conversation with my girls minister, Ashley, and I just broke. There was so many things that I had just been hiding, so much shame, things I just didn't know how to talk to anybody about. And we were sitting in her office and I started crying and told her everything I had never told anybody before. and said, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm about to go to college. Like, I don't know what this looks like in that. And so because I stayed close, the University of Arkansas was only 20 minutes from where I grew up. She ended up starting to meet with me every week. So every week from my freshman year of college through my senior year of college, she met with me. Wow. And we did The Search for Significance by Robert McGee. Is that his name? And that was where we started, because I seriously had so many emotions. For as emotional as I am, I had left a lot of things untapped, I think, because I didn't know how to process them. Like, my parents always gave permission for us to feel. It wasn't like that. I just didn't know what to do with a lot of them. And so I think that tangled me up in shame pretty good. And so so we met every week. We went through that. And then she taught me how to study the Bible. And she walked me through, just how to live like an honorable and pure life. And she just invited me alongside of her. So I have a distinct memory. She got married, I don't know, maybe when we were freshmen in college. And she would correct me. I'm sorry, Ashley, if you ever hear this. But sometime around then, she had her first baby. And I remember us sitting in her living room, and we're meeting, probably a Jenny Allen study. We did a lot of those, and we're talking, and her first baby's just like rolling around on the floor. We put a bunch of cushions around so he couldn't go anywhere, and he just like rolled around while we talked. And it was just such a tender thing. And so that's when I think my faith really started to have some like much deeper roots than it had before. And it started to become my own, which is pretty typical, right? Like all of a sudden I wasn't living on my parents' faith. I was living on a faith that like me and the Lord were building together. And so in all of that, within college, I actually got my first ministry job. Okay. Jeffrey's sister, Natalie. So if anyone doesn't know my connection to Redemption City.
Shout out Natalie Self.
Hi, Natalie. Natalie and I were friends. She had been in Arkansas for a while, and she called me while I was on a mission trip over spring break my freshman year and said, hey, do you want to come work as a girls youth ministry intern this summer at First Baptist Wichita Falls, Texas? And so I was like, I didn't say anything except that I'm going to have to call you back. Because I was like, no, I've never thought about ministry before. At that point, I was an accounting major. Okay, so ministry.
Which was your calling, I think.
Right, very fluid into ministry. Really yeah, that's kind of the next step.
Numbers, ministry. Yeah. Anyways, thankfully, I do not do the accounting here because that major did not last long past my freshman year. Yeah, thank you so much. So Natalie offered me my first job. I went that summer and had a blast. They did try to convince me to transfer to Midwestern State, and I said, I go to an SEC school, so.
Sorry.
So I'm so sorry. And at that time, our football team was actually good, and so it was like a lot of fun. Ago, yeah, it was a long time ago. That doesn't even hurt me because it's true, So I got really involved in my college ministry, C3, was attending a group regularly. Me and my best friend Morgan were leading a group of girls at the campus of the church we grew up at, who were middle schoolers at the time. And we were having the time of our lives. It was such a fun group of girls. They were from all different schools in the area, which made it just like a blast, to get to hang out. And then I went back to Wichita Falls for another summer. And then my last summer of college, I actually interned at my home church. I was originally supposed to go to Colorado, but then I had to have a massive knee surgery that put me on crutches for 12 weeks, which is not fun in Colorado. So I just stayed home and did that. And then New Year's Eve of my senior year of college, we were having a New Year's party at the school of ministry at the church.
I bet that was a blast.
We actually had a lot of fun. It's a lot of dancing.
Whoa.
In a Baptist church. Oh my gosh.
Approved dancing.
Okay. Baptist approved. Yeah, it was like, okay. And so
it was okay.
This guy is there who I'd known in youth ministry. He was a few years older than me. And he was like, hey, have you thought about doing an internship at the church I'm at in Georgia? Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, Bailey, my friend has talked to me about it, but like, I just don't know. At that point, I was thinking like I'd changed my degree to child development, and I was thinking I'd take the GRE and go into social work. Like that was kind of my game plan at that point. I loved my ministry experience, but I was like, other people are much better at this. Like, let's roll with them. And so, I was like, I don't know. And he was like, just apply and see. And I was like, okay, cool. So I applied. My old youth pastor was the XP, the executive pastor at this church that this guy was at as well. So I knew like 4 or 5 staff members there already. And so I applied, I do some interviews, end up saying yes, and I commit to a year of being in Georgia. And I was like, after that, I'll come back, take the GRE, and like roll with my original plan, right?
Accounting / kids
/ social
like
work.
Yeah.
It's a wild ride in my brain. So I get to Georgia, and I'm about 4 months in, and I'm in youth ministry, student ministry at that point, and which is where my experience had been before. And there was just some stuff started happening, and it just like wasn't really working. And so they were getting ready to launch a second campus, and they looked at me knowing that my degree was child development, and they said, would you be willing to go and help us start the kids ministry down here? And then you can come back like once we've hired someone to do that. And I was like, sure, never done kids ministry before.
That's how they always get you. just for a minute, go over there.
Yeah,
and
it'll be great.
It's not going to be forever.
And it'll be fine.
Been there.
Yeah. So I was like, sure, but like I have no idea what I'm doing. So I'm having like the preschool person and the kids person at the first campus, at the Newton campus, like they're teaching me all I need to know about. I never really used planning center. Like with students, like you don't have as many volunteers, like, and we probably could have run a like smoother system, but like we just weren't using it at that point. And so, or I'd at least never been in charge of it. Maybe it was being used and it was just not on my plate. And so I'm like learning all of this. I get down there. We're launching in August 2014. And I get down there for the first Sunday in the movie theater where we're going to launch this campus. And we don't even have walls for the kids' rooms. So like the kids rooms, I use air quotes, kids' rooms are in the hallway, like the babies through 3-year-olds are in the hallway. And then we're using actual movie theaters for like main worship, kids worship, and like our pre-K class. We don't have walls, so we just have pipe and drape. That is what is supposed to keep a kid. This is just funny at this point.
The noise wasn't bad at all.
No, it was great. I'm like, how am I going to keep a kid in a room that's just pipe and drape? They're going to run straight through it.
Corral them.
Which, listen, they had, the stuff just hadn't come in. They had ordered it, but it was a comical first Sunday that was our option. So anyway, so I get about 4 months into that job, and I'm 23, and I'm terrified, and all my volunteers are older than me, and I'm literally spinning thinking, what am I doing here? I can't do this. Like, these people need someone who is older, who knows what they're doing, who, all the things I felt like I didn't qualify in, which I'm very good at doing to myself. And so, so I basically tell my campus pastor, I say, I am going to be done in May. And so just like keep that in mind.
Heads up.
As we go through this. So like be interviewing people for this job. And so he's like, okay. I could tell I caught him off guard because I hadn't been unhappy necessarily. I was just terrified. I was truly so terrified. And I can actually remember where we were when we had the conversation. It was right after Christmas, and we were like tearing down all these decorations that we had put together. And it was just the two of us like standing in this giant hallway of the movie theater that we had decorated. And he was like, okay, yeah, no, that, yeah. And he's like, we'll talk more about it after Christmas. So I go home, I like am meeting with a few people who like I know and trust. And I'm telling them like, hey, this is a decision I'm going to make. I'm going to come back here in May, back to Arkansas. It's going to be great. Like what a great, mostly great experience. I think I need to do something else. I don't think I can do this. And I remember one of my friends looking at me and she was like, yes, you can. Like nothing you have told me. She's like, I can't make a decision for you, but like you can do this. And so I all of a sudden was like, I guess maybe it is an option. But then I'm like, but I've already said no. So now I have to go back and like, actually.
Just kidding.
Yeah. It was a joke. So I get back and I go back to my campus pastor and I say, actually, I think I want to stick this out. So they make me go through like a 2.5 month interview process, which I'm not going to lie, 23-year-old me really did not see the point of. But that's, you're young. What do you know? Yeah. And sorry to all the 23-year-olds. You're going to learn so much.
Yeah.
Welcome.
What do you know, 23-year-olds?
You probably know more than I did at 23. That's the truth. And so I go through this interview process. They give me the full-time position. So now I have a full-time position before my internship was even supposed to like be up. And I am doing birth through college
Hello.
now.
Birth through college.
So go from kids and then birth to college immediately.
Yeah. Yeah. And thankfully, like the college part, not by myself, like totally, like our campus pastor was going, but over it.
Yeah.
Our campus pastor was going to a lot of the things. So there's a small college in LaGrange. That's where I lived.
Right.
And every time, in the town I lived. And so like, that was our, like, obviously our target for college ministry. And we just met with them on Wednesday nights in like it was like a BSM or BCM kind of building. I don't remember. And so I end up staying. I'm over birth through college for about 4 years. I think all of that is on my plate. It goes well. All the ministries are growing, which we're a new church and like we're a church of young families. And like there was 1 year where we had 18 babies born, like 4 sets of twins in that. It was, I was like, I don't have a
church, man.
Yeah, I don't have a baby room big enough for this. Cause at this point we had moved into we were in the movie theater for like 3.5 years. We moved into a warehouse that we like remodeled basically in 19 days. That's also a wild story. But I've never been more tired in my life than those days. But I was running really hard and I was young. And so like there was part of me that could, right? Like I convinced myself I didn't need much sleep. Like there was a lot of things that I was doing that.
Working 7 days a week.
Going to soccer games, we had a bunch of softball girls and baseball guys from the college. So those were Saturdays, after the soccer games for the littles in the morning. And it was just this never ending. Like there were days I would get up at like 5 a.m. And if it was a Wednesday, I would work and then we would do students and then we would do college ministry after that. And then, college kids, they're yappers and they got so many questions, which I love because I'll talk to anybody forever. And so there were nights I didn't.
And they have different bedtimes than adults do.
Exactly. Yes. So there's nights I'm not
stay
leaving
up later.
And it doesn't faze them.
Right.
And truthfully, even in college, I wasn't like a stay up late girl. So it was tough, but I was willing to do it.
Sure.
So sometimes I'm at the college until like 1 a.m. So I've worked an insane.
That's a 20-hour day.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot going on. There was a lot going on in the church. Right before I got to the church, the founding pastor had stepped down.
Okay.
And for about a year, we had the executive pastor that I knew was the interim, and then he ultimately became the lead pastor. So he's leading through a lot of change. Because the founding pastor was gone, that's all anyone who had ever been there. Like if you started the church, that's the only guy you know. He had been there for, 15 years or something, 14 years. And so there was just a lot of transition and a lot of people trying to like find their footing. But in that, when all the leaders are trying to find their footing, you're just constantly feeling like pulled and yanked, I just felt like I didn't know anything really. Like I had so much to learn at that point. We hit a point where I think it's like 8 or so people leave, and we were not a big staff. And so we feel that, right? You feel the weight of that. Then we get a new senior pastor and it starts great. Like we're all really excited. Obviously our executive team, they're exhausted. Like they've been leading these campuses and whatever other ministries they have. In all of that, I think it changed a lot of our dynamics as a staff. And I'm going to kind of focus into my campus at that point. Right around that time, we also at my campus, we finally hired a youth person. So he took 6th grade through college, and I had birth to 5th grade, and I had women's.
And were y'all working as colleagues? Is he reporting to you?
Colleagues.
So he really takes that department off of you.
Yes. Yeah.
You get to focus on, I know more than kids, but kids specifically.
Yes. Now. Yeah. Yes, which was great. And we hit it off right away. Like we were instantly friends. Good. We were actually still really, really great friends. And then, so at my campus, it was the campus pastor, me, the student pastor, and then a worship pastor who is also one of my very best friends in the world. And so,
besides us.
Besides y'all. I said one of.
Okay. Cool.
I said one of. I said one of.
Some space there. She didn't commit to us being.
I just wanted
to
she let the record show that.
Yeah.
Yes. You guys are two of my very best friends in the world. And I actually mean that from the bottom of my heart. That's not a joke. And so
but not Michelle. She's in the room.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was really focused on the two people in front of me.
Michelle's in the room.
I love you, Michelle.
She's also
we're squeezing hands now. We've made up. So anyway, so we have this like team dynamic that's really interesting, and going back to like how much I felt like I had poured out and given, like to the point where people were really concerned about me. I remember walking into one of our admin offices in Noonan, and she was the best. Like, she was the next gen admin, and she just like took care of me.
How so?
In so many ways. She always checked on me. She always let me just come into her office and like talk about things, and I knew it would never go anywhere else. It was like such a gift.
Yeah.
You know, she was so safe. And there was a point where one time, I think it was like we had Night to Shine, the special needs prom at our church, and we were testing the photo booth, and one of the worship arts guys had like pulled me in to like take a picture, and I took like a really silly one, you know, as I do. And it was like a Polaroid, and she kept it and put it up in her office, and she said, "I just like want to remember to pray for you all the time." Wow. And I was the only, I feel so like honored. Yeah. I was the only person that was on outside of like her kids, you know, like I was the only person on there. And I remember one time her looking at me and saying, she was like, "Courtney, I'm really nervous that you are about to be a puddle that we just like can't clean back up."
Wow.
She was like, "Not because like you're just giving so much." And I have struggled my entire life that I don't feel like enough ever. I don't think I'm exclusive in that. I'm just talking about my experience in that. Like, and so I was constantly just trying to measure up. That is when everything starts hitting the fan. I'm probably about 4.5 years into my 7-year stint there. And it gets really complicated because I've created some of the best community that I've ever had in my life. Some of my very best friends I've been on staff with, or I've been at church with for years now. I'm kind of like dependent on them in some ways, maybe more than I should have been in other ways. But like, I'm away from my family and from like the friends I've known my whole life. And so like, these are my people in my spot. And so it just starts to get messier and messier as time goes on, and COVID hits. And that's obviously, who knew what we were doing at that time. 2020 is when I really start going, this is like, I'm done with ministry. I'm not done with the church, and I'm not done with Jesus, because he held me so tight all of those years. So tight.
How so?
I mean, the fact that like, I sometimes feel like the fact that I came out of that, like still believing that he's good and faithful is a miracle upon miracle. So like in 2019, I started doing the Bible recap, which is just a walk through it's just a chronological walk through the Bible in a year. I did
highly recommend.
Yes, it's great. It's great. You can get it on your Bible app. I started doing that, and that was the first time I'd probably that consistently been in the Word in my life. You know, like
6 years into full-time ministry.
5-6 years, yeah, right. And that's the most consistent I've been. It's not like I didn't read my Bible, but now I'm like, no, I'm gonna commit to doing this every day. Now, that first year, sometimes I was doing 5 days in one, but like I finished in a year. I don't think you have to finish in a year. You're seeing that that's me, and that I need to make 100% on an assignment.
Firstborn,
yes,
goal-oriented.
Yes,
you finished.
I was going to finish in a year, even if it meant some Saturdays I'm spending 2 hours catching up on the reading. And so I do that in 2019, and I'm like, and Tara Lee Cobble, who does the Bible Recap podcast, she talks about the God shot, which is just what character do you see of God every day in the Bible, which is just such a different way to approach scripture.
Very good.
Because it's not about me. It's about God. And so.
And by focusing on him, actually that changes me more than focusing on me.
Yes.
It's an amazing thing.
It's incredible. Highly recommend. Yeah. And so all of a sudden I'm going, oh, this is different than I've ever experienced. He is still good, and he is still faithful. And I remember thinking like, he just has to be my refuge. Like it says, you know, in the Psalms. Wow, I'm gonna really everywhere. But like I'm trying to think.
But anytime you're like, you know, in the New Testament it says, or in the Psalms it says,
you're accurate.
It's like, you're probably spot on in there.
It's absolutely somewhere in there, you guys. And so, but I just remember like I have a journal, and I actually thought about this a lot, knowing that we were coming into this. But somewhere in one of my journals, actually no, it's my blue journal. there's a page that it just says refuge, and I like have all these things written out, and that was around that time.
That was your word.
That was my word, because I was like, the only way I survive this is knowing that he holds me. And so I think spending 2019 in scripture like that changed not what was happening around me, but started to really change me, and how I like view the word, how I view God, and just like that it's not all about me. Like there's messiness that has to be worked out here, but like, who is the Lord? Who is the Lord ultimately? Like,
yes.
And so then I'm going, well, now I want this is just a side note about, I'm just going to really push the Bible recap here. But like this, then in 2020, I look at like 6 of my friends, and some of them are people who have like, no one ever taught them how to read the Bible. Right. Like, and I'm not talking, this is moms that I'm working with on a regular basis who are like, their kids are in my ministry. They're some of my very best friends. And I was like, how about we do this together? So like, I don't know, like 7 of us do it together, 2020, 2021, we have a Facebook group with 150 people in it. Wow. And it wasn't like anything special, except that like we all just were craving it so badly.
So there's, one of the things that you mentioned whenever you were talking about your 12, 13, you come to Christ, you said you had an eagerness for God. Did that ever wane? Was there a point where that almost like laid dormant?
Yeah.
And then now it's resurging, and now it's not waned.
Right.
Since then. So how? Like, how have you kind of fanned the flame of that from the very beginning of your walk with Christ, you had this eagerness for God, leaning toward God kind of thing. So how have you fanned that flame throughout your kind of walk with Christ?
Obviously, scripture reading matters so much in that. I think just being willing to like to live open-handed, I think was another thing that like I just, ministry was never in my like line of view. Okay. It just wasn't. And like, and that's not all it is, but like, this is just very specific to my story. And this, like, I just had to go, God, okay, whatever. Cause every time I tried to make a move that was not what he had, it just like the doors never opened. And I tried hard in some areas. Okay. And so I think that was part of it of like, and it was like a constant opening. It's not like I just like opened them once and like gave it up. It was like okay. And I think the reason I was able to do that is because I had people in my life who were encouraging me to do that. My mentor in college, Natalie, Amy Butler, who was my second youth pastor's wife, who we had a great relationship. I had all these people like looking at me going like, you have to keep this open, like, and you have to trust that the Lord is gonna provide and take you where he wants you to go.
And you can't even imagine that they're right, but they ended up being
being so right. Yeah. Yes, exactly that. And so I think it's that. I think also, so a lot of stuff happened in my family when I was in college too. Like, just I have a sibling who's not a believer, and that kind of all came out, and so we're all like kind of like not reeling in a way, yes, because it was kind of like a shock, but then going like, okay, how do we love? So then too, in that, you're having to own your faith again, or I'm like having to learn how to own my faith even more, because I'm like, well, why do I believe what I believe? Which only takes you to scripture, like, it took me to scripture to be like, okay, do I believe all these things that someone stood up and I did, but like, it was just like this reminder of myself. And like, and all of a sudden I'm like, now I have a desperate need for someone who I love to know it too. Wow. And that changes a lot. Like, it is really hard for me to think about my sibling not knowing that. Mm-hmm. And so I think that changed a lot of my faith too, because all of a sudden it was like, no, like this has to be real so that they see that it's real. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It can't just be this like mundane, I show up to church on Sunday and I'm just there, like, and sometimes that's all we can give, but like, that was not the season I was in at that point, like, it had to be real, because I wanted them to see that this is what life is. It is not all these things that the world is going to offer you. And it wasn't any of the things that the world offered me. Like I tried, I tried other stuff, and then ultimately like got so convicted that I just confessed it all to Ashley in one sitting, bless her heart, And so I think that those are the things that like, that kept that fire going. And it was looking back on those things as I was in the trials in Georgia to go like, okay, he's carried me this far. He's carried me this far. He's carried me this far. Mm-hmm. And I remember at some point during COVID, we did these like daily devotionals on Facebook. And so like a different staff member would get on and we were doing Psalm 23 at one point. And mine was the verse that like, he'll lead you beside still waters. And water is just, I don't know, like I love being around water. And I think I was a lake baby. I grew up on the lake. So like, it's just a peaceful place. It's where I like see the Lord in a lot of ways. Like it's quiet, you know, like there's just like so much beauty to it. And I remember thinking like he has done that. Like he has kept peace in me even when it didn't feel like, even when it was like a fight to feel it, you know, like there's just this underlying, like he really has never left me alone ever. And, you know, I think it's easy to feel lonely in life. Like, and truthfully, like this is a different part of my story that I'm not going to like go into here, but like I'm single and 33 and like, that is not what I thought was going to happen, but he hasn't left me in that either. Ever. He's given me so many people that like, sure, yeah, I'd love to be married. So if anyone like knows anyone, but
single and ready to mingle, we'll add.
So we have an application if you want to fill it out.
It's in the description.
It's in the description. It's linked. But anyways, like I think that he's just taught me so much about like that you're never truly alone. He's always going to carry you. And like, yes, life can feel so lonely sometimes. And it does and still does sometimes. But like, he's also given me community that makes me feel like I'm part of their families.
That's great.
And that's a gift, you know? And I have a great family. Yeah. And so like biological family, but I also just have a huge family of friends that I love.
One of my passions in the church is connecting the generations. And, you know, like my family, when you're over at our house, it's more fun, right? So like when the generations interact, you know, life just gets better. So how have, you know, empty nesters and young families, how have they grafted you into their families? Because I do want our Redemption City folks to hear that and emulate what others have been for you. So how have they done that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'm a very big proponent. You're welcome. I'm a very big proponent of like, you do not have to be in the same life stage as someone to befriend them, right? And I think for a long time, I didn't realize that was such a gift that the Lord had given me, honestly. And I say that with like as much humbleness as I can because I really fought it for a long time. But I remember one time my friend Morgan looking at me and she's going, when we're leading this group of middle school girls and we have great relationships with them. And she's looking at me and she's going, I don't understand how you're like friends with their younger siblings and friends with their parents. And I'm like, what do you mean? And Morgan's great. She's lovely. I'm way more extroverted than her. So like, I'm naturally just going to put myself in people's business. But anyways, like, so I think that's always kind of been in me to like, for whatever reason, the Lord was like, we're just going to.
You didn't have to try.
I didn't have to try that hard. Yeah. No, I didn't have to try. Yeah. But obviously as you get older, that does change. And like moving to a new space in Georgia, that's what I'll talk about the most because that's when I moved away from everyone I'd known. Right. And so minus like a few people. But when I moved to LaGrange, I was really on my own. I think of one specific family, the Bowens, were the first to like really take me in Georgia. It's not the other people were great and kind and loving, but they were the ones who like, we didn't have an office because we met in a movie theater. And so Lauren was like, will you just come over and like sit at the counter and work? And I was like, at first I was like, no, like I'm not gonna,
that's weird.
I'm not gonna do that to you. You know, like you don't want this like chatty Cathy up in your business all the time. And at that point they would have had 2 young kids. Their oldest would have been like 3 and their youngest was maybe like 1.5. That's probably wrong. Sorry, Lauren. But she was like, no, just come on like Tuesdays and Thursdays. Well, then Tuesday nights they did family dinner. So her whole family came over because her whole family like lived in that area. Her parents, her brother and sister-in-law ended up moving back while I was there. So she was like, well, if you're here on Tuesdays anyways, just stay for family dinner. And I was like, no, like I couldn't impose. And she's like, Lauren doesn't really give choices. And if she ever listens to this, she's probably gonna laugh about that. Like she didn't really give me the choice.
Friend, though.
It was a great friend. And it was something that I just didn't know how desperately I needed it.
She knew you needed it probably more than you did.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, a buddy of mine, Grant, he says that discipleship is not adding to the calendar. It's adding someone to your calendar. It's including them into your calendar. So
that's what she did.
Already we're having family dinner, so come along. Already we're here in this space. So yeah, bring your laptop, work, and that's great.
Yeah. That's exactly it. And so I think that's really what people did to like integrate me in, and more people did it. Like when I first moved to Texas and I'm like still getting to know people and everything, all of a sudden my grocery bill was like I was like, I haven't paid this much for groceries in years. And I'm like, oh, it's because I was at people's houses all the time, you know? Like all of a sudden I'm like, I didn't have to feed myself like 5 out of the 7 days in a week. You know? And so, so I think they just like, yes, it was exactly that. It was just inviting me in. And in that, like, that's what Ashley had done as my mentor. That's what Natalie, I mean, I lived with Natalie and Brandon for 2 summers. That's what Natalie and Brandon did when I worked in Wichita Falls. And I lived with them within a year of their marriage, which I look back on that and I'm like, what a wild choice for you guys to make, honestly.
Yeah.
Thanks for your sacrifice. And so, I think it's such a beautiful picture. Exactly what that, like, you don't have to add something. You just bring them into where you already are. And all of those people showed me how to do that too. So now I have these like college girls coming up behind me in LaGrange and I'm like, well, just come to my house. I have chips and salsa. Just like come eat with me. Or like one time, one of them went grocery shopping with me because I was like, I literally only have this time this week to go grocery shopping and that's your only available time. Come on. Yeah. So we walked Aldi together, you know, and talked about like deep things. Like it wasn't like it was like a grocery store conversation, and so I think there's so much beauty too in mixing generations, like, and life stages. Like, you know, I learned so much from the people who were in front of me. And that's what most of my friends in Georgia were like 10-ish years older than me. And a lot of them had families and all of that, you know, been married for a while. And but like, yes, it was about that, but it wasn't just about that. It was about like how they faithfully kept walking with Jesus through the midst of all of the things that they've been through, right? Or their honesty to go, no one's ever taught me how to do this. And I go, well, great, like let's do it together, you know? And so I think it's such a gift to learn from people in different stages. And I think that's true too. I like the older now is like someone who in my city group in particular is on the older side of my city group. Like there's so much I learn from the ones who are 10, 12, 13 years behind me, you know, like and it's beautiful. Like you don't have to be friends with someone in this very specific stage. That's not to say you can't. And like, there's beauty in that. Yes. Yeah, right. Have friends who have kids who have kids that are the same age as your kids. Like that's wonderful and beautiful and like, or been married a similar amount of time or whatever. Like I'm 100% for that. But I think, you know, we don't have to like put so many boundaries and rules on our lives. And I think one of the things I hear the most working like between family ministry and women's ministry and all of this is like, well, the younger generation, like they're not going to think, like they're not going to want to hang. And I'm like, no, they do.
You're like,
and then
I see them hanging.
I see them. And like we have younger generations who are craving someone older. Right. Yeah. And then older generations who like would love to take a younger person under their wing, but don't think they want to. And so I'm like, you guys actually all want this. So just like come together.
Let's all get together. Yeah.
You want it even if you're not naming
desire.
You actually do. One thing I think is so interesting and a lot of people would be really interested to hear about, how old were your parents when you were born?
20 and 22.
And you and your parents are super close.
Yes.
You know, so what was that like? Being born to super young parents. Mom was pregnant when she was 19, had you when she was 20. So what was that like? Man, that's a good question and like a crazy question to answer. So I remember growing up just being like passed around their college friends, you know, like I was there's so many pictures of us, especially like like my mom's senior year where I'm like 2, 3 and like I'm the one kid in the midst of like these 8, 22-year-olds and 24-year-olds and like had a blast. I think it also meant that I had very close relationships with both sets of my grandparents because they took me in a lot, right? Like they babysat when my parents had to work. They kept me on the weekends, you know, whatever they needed to do because both my parents finished college too, like after having me. And so, which is not lost on it is not lost on them, the fact that they had people who could help them in that season. So, and who, you know, my grandma, my dad's mom had 2 boys. And so when a girl came along, she was just like the most excited you could ever possibly be. But I think it allowed such a beautiful relationship with both sets of my grandparents to go, like, they took me in. I watched all of them love Jesus. Like that was great. And then I have 2 younger siblings. And so by the time my youngest sibling came along, she was just like my real life baby doll. You know, I was 7
And we had a brother in the middle of us, and he was fine. But like, I got this like real life baby
He's fantastic.
doll.
Quite a basketball player too.
Yeah. Shout out Austin. No, I love him. But I got this like real life baby doll. But I think because I was so close in age to my parents, there were a lot of things that we went through that I understood more of than they probably would have preferred me to, you know, and I don't like want to speak too much for them, but like, I just felt the burden of things that we went through, like financially, they did not place it on me. Hear me say that.
Aware.
No.
Yeah. I would not want anyone to think that, but I'm just aware of what's happening because I'm watching them struggle. Right. And so I think
we have 3 kids. Our youngest is growing up in a different world than our oldest.
Exactly.
You know, like,
yeah, exactly. And so like, there were things, and they know we've had conversations about this over the course of time, but like, I also just have a tendency to really try to carry things, maybe like a classic older child. I don't know, but like, just let me help. And they didn't let me. Like, no, like when I had a job in high school, it was to go do fun stuff. Like, they took care of that. Like, I had to pay for my gas because I liked to drive everywhere, and I was my only friend that drove for the longest time. But like, you know, this was like for me to go out and eat, me to go get snow cones, me to go to the movies. They were not putting like the responsibility on me of like helping make a mortgage payment. And I'm not, and like, that's just where we were at. That's where we were at.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, so like, I think there was a part of that though, where even now, like, it felt like in some ways I grew up really quickly, but still had a really great childhood at the same time, you know, just cause I had to help take care of my siblings. Like, when I could drive, I was taking them or picking them up from basketball practice and doing, because my parents are both working, you know, and my parents are both very good at what they do. And so, you know, there were just responsibilities that, and because I'm such a heavy carrier of things, that I probably made it more than it was sometimes, I think.
That's interesting. Okay, a couple more things I want to get to. One, I want to ask about how you got to Redemption City. I feel like I know it. So I do want to ask you about, you know, how you, instead of quitting ministry, like you mentioned, you thought about, you helped plant a church, which is, you know, objectively nuts.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Okay. Instead of going to because you could have gone to a larger church with more built out systems and structures, and you could have at once gotten healthy and probably made more money, and you know, but instead you chose to really take a big. So I want to talk about that in a second, but first, you know, just like that staff exhaustion piece, I think it's so. I don't know that sometimes when we talk about pastoral and church staff exhaustion, I know that it looks like most of what we do is drink coffee and read the Bible to people. Okay. And we do those things. Okay.
Yes, we do.
We're doing it now. Okay. But what is it about being in church ministry that is naturally and necessarily exhausting?
Yeah. I think you just have to show up so much, right? Like,
Wow.
and it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. It is just, it's a lot. It's you're kind of the person everyone calls, you know, or maybe not, but like within us. Yeah. People are looking to you, and they're looking to you for all different kinds of things, right? They're looking to you for support. They're looking to you for encouragement. They're looking to you because they have a million questions, and we want to answer them, you know, and at the deepest level of all of us is that like, we want you to know Jesus if you don't, right? And so like, we're going to carry that so heavy. But then on top of all of that, this is still a job, and you still have to have systems in place. Right. You still have to have policies. You still have to have procedures. And so you're trying to care well for people while also you're just like trying to figure out how to make sure your ministry is safe. Like, especially with kids, like I'm thinking specifically, or students, you know, like I have to make sure we're not putting anyone in these rooms that doesn't need to be in these rooms. I need to make sure that doors are locked, that people don't need to be coming in. I need to make sure that we have a place for every kid every single kid to feel safe, every family to feel safe. And that weighs on you. Like, it really does. And then I think we can get, as the church, and I'm saying this like capital C church, maybe American church more specifically. I don't have a lot of experience with church around the world, like personally, but like I think we can get really event driven, and that wears you out because you're just constantly planning something. Next thing. And all of a sudden it starts to get rewarded. And I don't think this is exclusive to ministry necessarily, but I know it in ministry deeply, is like all of a sudden you start to get rewarded for never taking days off, and for always being available, and for never putting your phone on do not disturb, and for never taking a Sunday, and you just like keep adding to that list, and someone called you at 2 a.m. and you went, and and we've done that, and sometimes it's necessary, and you want to like, and the beauty of being in a healthy place is that like I can go, hey, I was at someone's house from like 2 to 5 this morning, so I'm gonna like sleep. Yeah. And so like in a healthy place, that's great. I don't think I know everywhere is not that way. And so I think that leads to a lot of exhaustion.
A.W. Tozer talks about the tyranny of the urgent that I just want us to really avoid, and structurally, that's I practice the Sabbath. We really want to go out of our way to take our time and enjoy our walk with Jesus and run hard in ministry. The two things can happen, simultaneously. So I think that's one of so as Redemption City people, listen, and that's something that we are dead set on, is having a healthy staff. And, we want to grow, and we're going to be aggressive to reach people in our community, but not at the cost of our staff. Not and we can do.
You can do both. Yeah. And I was about to say some things have to change, to your point, and I'd love for you to speak to that, because you went from the basically like hustle culture, is celebrated, right? When you start to rest, what had to change for you? And let's say, what is changing for you?
It's a current process. I didn't take a Sabbath before, and I am not sitting here and saying I do it well. Matt and I actually had a meeting not that long ago that said Sabbathing is not going great. So I think I had to give myself permission to pull back, to go like, actually, I don't know if you remember saying this to me, but there was one point on a phone call, this when we were at the Y, it was a long time ago, where I just remember, I remember being so devastated over something. And a side note, I was depressed and didn't know. And that was definitely part of that.
That ends up mattering.
But I think also some of it's just, again, the lies that we're like constantly battling in our head. I remember saying to you, I just don't want to disappoint you and Jeffrey. Because I think there was something so deep in me that was like, these guys trusted me to come in with them. And if I disappoint them, oof, And you said to me, you're like, who cares? Not who cares about my feelings, but like, that is not the goal here. The goal is not that like you meet every single, the way you said it was so sweet. That was my summary of it. But like basically what if you do disappoint us? What happens? And you made me like walk it out, and I was like, oh, well, I guess it's actually not the end of the world.
Yeah.
And
Jesus loves me, my parents love me, and my shirt. It's fine, actually.
It's actually fine. And like, we have a great relationship. And so like, but it sits in me all the time when I start to get in that zone again of like, oh, walk this out. What if this ball got dropped, or this ball did get dropped? Okay, yes, actions have to happen, but like, there's freedom here to go. Like, we give each other grace, and we hold each other like we work really hard.
That's right.
And also, there's grace and compassion because we're humans trying to figure it out. And so it's like that fight of like, it's okay. It's really okay.
Yeah.
And that's what I have to tell myself. Like, it's okay that I have a text message sitting here, because on Fridays I don't check my text messages, and I'll answer them tomorrow. That's fine. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And it actually is.
Yep.
Tell us about coming to Redemption City and why in the world, not that, so tell us about that.
Okay. Yeah. So as I said, I was done with ministry. I had applied for a lot of jobs. I had actually interviewed for some other jobs. My parents were living in Colorado at the time, and I was like, I'm going to Colorado. That's exactly what's going to happen. I'll work at Starbucks. I don't care. Because coffee, and I'm pretty sure they give you healthcare, which is great. And so when you work so many hours, I was thinking about that because I had to. And so
adult things.
And so I'm like thinking like, I'm going to go to Colorado at least for a year and just like figure it out. And then January of 21, I have a screenshot of it, gosh. And Natalie texts me, and she's like, hey, because she knew about all of this. We've been friends for a long time. She's, ahead of me in ministry. And so I've leaned on her a lot.
So January of 21, we're having preview services once a month and meeting in my home. So Redemption City is like 18, 22 people somewhere in there.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. So Natalie texts me, and she goes, she's like, hey, I gave your resume to my brother, which is the only Noblet I didn't really know, just for the people. I gave your resume to my brother,
Save
Jeffrey.
The best for last,
and this guy, Matt, that they're planning a church with in Fort Worth. And my response was, I'm totally fine with that, but you need to tell him to talk to someone else. because
if you cussed in your response, thank you for editing that out. I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, I did. For sure. No. So, and I was like, that's fine. And she goes, well, will you just talk to Jeffrey? And I was like, fine, I will talk to Jeffrey.
Got her.
And so
I barely
Jeffrey
know
and
him
I,
anyway.
Jeffrey and
What's
I,
the big deal?
yeah, what's it? Whatever.
Yeah.
I guess I'll get to know the only novel that I haven't like super gotten to know,
Yeah.
you know? And so Jeffrey and I have a phone call one night, and I just ask a lot of hard questions. And I don't know how much we've ever talked to you about this, but I also ask questions about you, which I was like, I realize this is putting you in a really awkward place, but like, here's what's happened to me. I can't do it again. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to go into detail, but if Matt, if you're seeing these things now, like I can't come, you know, obviously he didn't say that because I'm sitting here, but like, I was so raw at that point. I had to know going into it. And so, and I didn't know anyone who knew Matt. It was Jeffrey, who was also an acquaintance at the time, you know? And so, so then Jeffrey's like, I'm like, okay, I still don't know. I don't know. And Jeffrey goes, just have a phone call with Matt, which apparently is just the way to get me to have a conversation. I was like,
you're like, I love talking to people. Okay.
Actually, I really
Why
do.
not?
So it's
Sounds
easy.
awesome.
So Matt and I set a phone, I think like a FaceTime actually. And I know the weird things that you remember, you know, and we have our like first initial call, and I don't remember everything we talked about in that one. I think we just kind of got to know each other, but then we set another one. And before that meeting, Matt, you sent me like, actually I have screenshots of this too, because I remember sending it to friends being like, this is crazy. Like no one's ever asked me some of these questions before. Yeah. Just like all these questions you want to know about like kids ministry, but also me and like what I think about discipleship and all these things. And I was like, this feels so intentional, which mattered a lot to me in that season. And so we end up having another FaceTime, which was when y'all had that big freeze. Cause I remember seeing Waters and Dr. Pepper's like stacked sky high behind you in your office. And, so we set a date for me to come out and visit, which was Easter Sunday. What were we thinking?
Yeah.
And I didn't make it here for the Easter service because my flight got canceled. Which like I was trying
That's
not
when the car flipped into the ravine right before service.
Right here,
Before
outside
Easter.
here.
Yeah.
Yep.
In the building we're in now.
Yeah.
That's wild. So I don't make it here. I do my Easter service, and I was supposed to be here in time for y'all's. It didn't happen. You send a couple sweetie girls to pick me up at the airport. I go to dinner with them, have a blast, get dropped off at I stayed with you and Courtney. Yep. And so the whole time there's like one family that knows in Georgia that I'm doing this. And of course, like my family and close friends outside of that know. And so I'm like, just pray. Like, I still don't think I want to do this. Like, I still don't think ministry is it. Like a church plant is wild. Yeah. I've been there, done that. And it's hard. It's really hard work. And so with these two guys that I still don't really know, you know? Yeah. So I get here, and you guys take me to like the best places to eat, which seemed like a strategy. And
J.T. Garcia's.
It was so good.
So good.
And listen, I came
Still
from Georgia.
We are open to being this show being sponsored by JT's.
Yes,
that's
thank you.
we
give away your salsa every week to our first time
just
guests.
So you know.
But we pay for it. And so, anyways, I remember sitting and asking you guys like really hard questions. You guys were such champs and so gracious with me, truthfully. And I remember thinking like, this is different. This is different than what I've experienced. They're like really caring about the experience that I've had. They really care. There's a whole side note of this that we do not have time for, but like just being a woman in ministry and in some of the positions I'd sat in where like a lot of the times I was the only woman in the room.
Right. Yep.
And you guys just like made me feel so loved and so seen. And we're very honest. So you didn't answer questions the way you thought I wanted you to answer them. You answered them as you believe and feel and think. And that was a vital piece to me. And so I go back. When I get back, it is really crazy at the church I was at. People are quitting. Like 7 people had resigned in like such a short amount of time. And Matt was like, normally I wouldn't put a time limit on you, but like it'd be great if we can know by this day so we can talk to other people. And I was like, for sure. Absolutely. So I'm like praying about it. I actually go back and almost immediately resign from my position. But I had a date in mind.
Yeah.
And I still didn't know. I did not know what I was going to say. I think at that point I was like, Lord, I don't really want to do this. Like I loved y'all. I loved your kids. I loved your wives. I think the Uptons were there. I loved the Uptons, who we have a crazy old connection through Arkansas. And so I loved all of that, but I was still just so unsure. And I just remember sitting with the Bowens, not shockingly, sitting down at their dining room table and going, they're like, Courtney, this is it. Like the way you talk about this, the way like, and like they had just walked ministry with me. So like, you are good at this. And they didn't want me to leave. Like you have to understand, like that was a really painful goodbye. And so like for them to just offer that freely was a huge deal. And so all I had to say, I called Matt and said, hey, I would love to join your team. And he was like, I thought you were going to say no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Calling.
And I've been here ever since, and I love it. And I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And that's true.
Well, like we started with, I can't imagine Redemption City without Courtney J. Fox. And any parting words, Pastor Jeff or Courtney, as we wrap up today?
I think just for Courtney, like the passion for people to know like Scripture. Like y'all heard a little bit about that today. I wish you could have talked more about that. Maybe we'll do a follow-up episode because when I think of Courtney Fox, I think of someone who, which is no surprise why you're in so many people's homes because you immediately connect with people, but not on like a superficial level. But then it goes somewhere. You know, sometimes you like connect with people and you're like, that's a good friend that I can hang. And that's good. Like you need those friends. But like Courtney's been over to our house, to your point, Matt, and she stops talking to me and Leisha, and she's hanging out with the kids.
Yeah.
And I've got 5 kids, ranging today from 14.
Happy birthday, London.
14 down to 5, and she connects with all of them. But what I love is like my kids will come back telling me what Courtney told them about life, not like what to do, but just like, oh, this is important. They're excited to tell you things. And so
genuine relationships from 5.
Yes, that's what I mean.
All the way up to the oldest, who we won't mention who's the oldest of your 7, but
she's 14 though, and that's weird.
I mean, Leisha.
Oh yeah, that's true, Leisha.
But yeah, just deep relationships from 1-year-old to 90 years old in our church.
And
Courtney
I think that's what makes the family ministry.
That's right.
What it is, because she leads our team that way. So I don't know who this will go to, but if they're listening to it, you need to call Courtney Fox, email her if you have questions about student ministry or kids all the way up to college, really. And she does help with our women's ministry. So there's a ton to talk about, but I just think the highlights from today are highlights. But like I listened to the Bible recap because of you, and so that changed my consumption of the Bible because I shouldn't say stuck in the car, but in the car a lot.
Yeah.
And so that I never read because it is still reading, you know, like audio wise, but the Bible more than ever. And Leisha can attest to that since you told me that. So that's
How
that's
great
been
is
a cool
that?
thing. Yeah.
Courtney, we love you.
Love you
Let's go
guys.
make Fort Worth more like heaven.
Let's do it.
Thanks for listening.